G'day, g'day. After seeing what the final product of Redfall looks like and knowing what Bethesda is like as a publisher, I can't help but feel strongly that this game was commissioned by money-hungry executives trying to chase trends, and Arcane didn't put anywhere near enough effort in making this work because they either didn't want to be making it or the requirements were so far away from Arcane's regular design philosophy that it just became difficult for them to make. I think the budget itself was probably skimped out on as well. I see the sentiment that this is a failure on Xbox's part, but I think this final product was already essentially set in stone long before any Xbox overhead had started following their acquisition of ZeniMax. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time the game was looked at, if it was looked at very closely at all, it was decided that cancelling the game would be more of a loss than just trying to make it work and try to recoup at least some of the money back. Unfortunately, despite being a masterpiece of a game, Prey undersold. I think following its release, Bethesda would have come to Arcane and told them they need to put out a game that can hit high sales numbers, and would have looked at several trends that were common amongst these high number sellers. Tiered items to help keep players grinding away, which in turn would retain players' attention, games as a service model including microtransactions to bring in more revenue and have players coming back on a regular basis, multiplayer to probably help appeal to the masses and likely get people convincing their friends to play with them, and then you make it open world to facilitate any bullshit side quests with no depth or any other shallow side content, collectibles and stuff, just to purely get players playing for a longer amount of time. The microtransaction thing I mentioned due to a leaked screenshot of an earlier build of the game that supposedly contained a shop. As for its removal, there are currently two thoughts that I'm sitting on. Either Microsoft insisted on it being removed following their acquisition to try and win some brownie points before gamers inevitably saw the garbage that would be its full release, or Arcane themselves pushed back really hard to not include any live service shenanigans, but couldn't do anything about the fact that the game as a whole had already been built around just being a bare bones, shallow live service experience. I highly recommend watching this video by Renns Reviews that goes over Wolfenstein Youngblood, and he goes into the details about how this game suffers for trying to chase the trend of live service and how the design philosophy just doesn't work for the game, especially when compared to previous Wolfenstein games, and it's quite informed. He goes into a lot of detail about it, and he's also just really entertaining as a reviewer, so highly recommend that. That will be linked. Now, on to Redfall, the cutscenes. I do not think having static images is an issue at all, but Redfall uses their regular in-engine graphics for them instead of the actual interesting looking 2D art featured in the game's intro. The first thing that leads me to think of this being some sort of budget constraint is because it looks exactly like what IO Interactive did when they had no publisher funding whilst making Hitman 2. We went from these incredible CGI videos to static images for the cutscenes instead. I fail to see Arcane's use of these as a creative decision because honestly it looks like shit. If it's not a budget issue, it reeks of a severe rush job. The open world design is one of the worst. Not only is it almost entirely empty, but all of the buildings are a whole lot of nothing. In the short time I played, I was actually surprised to see that almost all of the houses in this small suburban street I was walking through were boarded up and inaccessible. The one house that did seem to have an entry housed two vampires that stood completely still as I shot them through the window. They couldn't get to me. They can't jump through windows, so the AI kind of just bugged out and sat there and moved left and right a couple of times, and that was it. And then when I got into the house, it had just a couple of pieces of furniture and some crafting items and a shotgun. There was no environmental storytelling, no interesting characters. It was just an empty, basic designed house. The AI looks like it was either not tested properly at all, or there was simply no room in the budget for QA testing. Arcane aren't known for robust AI systems, But what they've done in previous games like Dark Messiah and Prey is showcase at least a basic understanding of creating engaging combat encounters with enemies that are capable of traversing basic geometry. What they've done in Redfall is of such poor quality that it contributes to the idea that the game was being rushed out so the team can hurry up and work on something they actually want to make. And finally, the performance. So far this year, there have been a stupid amount of PC ports that feature some garbage performance issues. Hogwarts, Jedi Survivor, now Redfall. The game does not feature anything that would indicate needing powerful hardware. It just runs bad. I've got a 3080, using a 5800X 3D CPU, 32 gigs of RAM, and I run games at 4K resolution off a Samsung 970 EVO SSD. Despite running DLSS at performance, I could not maintain a locked 60 FPS. I could be looking to the left of a scene and be sitting at 60 perfectly fine, slowly look to the right and lose all of my frames despite nothing actually happening on screen or in the distance as far as I could tell. Not to mention the Xbox version being locked to 30 in current year with an update to 60 coming at some unknown point of time in the future. Fucking embarrassing, and it just again reinforces the idea that either the team wasn't really trying when developing the game or it needed another year at least of development, but Microsoft just said, get it out into the world and we'll let you make something actually good instead of having to listen to Bethesda's garbage requests and chasing a direct-to-video open-world game like almost everything Ubisoft has been releasing for over 10 years now. I really can't wait for some sort of expose to come out where all these concerns are addressed and we learn the truth about what happened behind the scenes for this game. At least with Deathloop, there was a real game full of charm and care put into it behind the crazy amount of hand-holding and more restrictive nature of the game when compared to something like Dishonored 2, or even the first Dishonored. But we can blame the casuals that were playtesting it for that. Arcane have said they will be dedicated to fixing this game and improving it further, but as Skillup said in his review, this game is irredeemable, and any chance at fixing this game properly, not just any frame rate issues, but actually properly fixing this game so that it becomes a good experience as opposed to a shit experience, would require an entire overhaul of its systems and levels. Arcane just needs to cut their losses with this game and simply move on to something else. Prove that there is still talent and passion at the studio with a game that's worthy of being part of the team's legacy. Until the next video, have a good one.